through this?
Well, and let me say this, generally, I think there is, when it was reviewed by the board, they also looked at the issue of how many questions do we want to put? I think that was fundamental, because even from the last election we just had, there's a lot of referendum questions. Sometimes you don't get the people really paying attention or caring about it. So I think that was a fundamental thing. Let's make sure that we use what we need to use, and maybe some of these other things, not. So I think that's important. But on the same token, I would say the board was very comfortable with the majority of changes that you're going to make. So I thought that was good. There were some that they looked at as policy versus maybe changing the charter, but I think they fundamentally looked at everything and saw that these were reasonable things, and you'll see that from the BOC review document.
So where are we right now in terms of the questions?
So right now, the questions have generally been,
No, I mean, how many would we be putting to
I
the
think we have
voting
9.
public with our current
I think
status?
there's 9.
Nine. And I want to say we had 15 in this last election. So 9, I don't think is an unreasonable number. That's my personal opinion. Yes.
Sure.
Okay, just for historical reference and precedent, in the 83 charter revision question to the public, there were 20 questions and 17 passed.
20 questions, 17 passed in the past charter.
In
Revision.
83 revisions,
Okay,
just like
in
what we're
83.
doing, there were 20 questions put before the public and 17 passed. So my position would be, I'm open-minded to hear if they make an argument that maybe we didn't see that perspective and change it. I'm not so much open to reducing the number of questions just to reduce the number of questions.
Agreed.
And I don't want you
Chair
to,
Panic-
think that was their mindset, because it wasn't. But it
Okay.
is something that we all think about.
So I'm going to agree with Mr. Terrapini 100%. I know, don't fall over, John.
I'm not.
I did get a lot of too many words, too many questions, has to be fewer out of the video. So I'm Mr. Salzman, I'm very happy to hear your assessment of it. I do think there are one major place where we could tighten it up, but in general, we have discussed and analyzed and thought about and discussed again each one of these things. So if we still feel they are of importance, I don't think that looking at just the number it should be a driving factor for us. So that's where I'm with you on this. So how would you like to present this information, Mr. Salzman?
I figured we would go through the BOC review document, which Michelle has provided everyone and which we have on the board.
The highlights here, that represents our highlights, and then you
Yes.
had, it doesn't show here on red, but underneath B, you say maybe list. You have comments after each one of those, and those are your comments. You have not changed.
These are this is how the board came out on these issues. Like, for example, the first one, maybe list. Is it one that has to be? No. Do they have a problem with it? No. Is there too many, kind of thing, right? They didn't have a problem with it, but it was just, is this a necessary one?
Okay, and have you eliminated any from our original?
We have changed nothing
Okay, all right,
from
that's
what
good.
you have proposed, other than the comments that the BOC said.
Okay, thank you. All right, I'm handing it over to you. Why don't you walk us through it?
Okay, so section 3 is limitation of powers. The additional language of dredge and spoil sites. So the acquisition by the city of real property under the power of eminent domain, storm drainage improvements, and dredge and spoil sites. Again, not a problem with it. It's just a question of, is that important enough to put as a referendum question? I would assume you all will say yes.
I wasn't for it to begin with, so.
I know, that was your
So, I mean,
suggestion to
I'm-
begin, wasn't it?
I went along with the majority, but if the majority wanted to change their mind, you're not gonna hurt my feelings.
I mean,
About taking the
remember
dredge
that,
spoil
Well,
site.
the majority voted that we wanted to see this included. So that's,
No,
yeah.
yeah,
so remember, just so you know, here's how the question will kind of, or the ordinance will come out. Proposed amendment to section 3H of the city charter to increase the limitation threshold on the purchase, sale, exchange, conveyance, or leasing of real property, and to include dredge and spoil sites under the power of eminent domain by the city.
Yeah,
So
that's a good question. So that is one question.
that is one question that
All
will
right.
have these three sections.
Okay.
And note that the BOC was okay with H and I. So that was a non-issue.
Okay.
So it's only really, do you want to put dredge and spoil sites on there? If you don't, BOC is fine with you not putting it on there. BOC is fine. You know, they didn't have a real big, they would have just put that section under, doesn't have to. That makes sense.
Okay. Yes, question.
Yes, with the purchase of the Stamus property, is that now moot?
Has that been approved
Yes.
Yeah.
by, okay.
And that's the other thing I would point out to you. We hate to put anything in the charter that's for a specific, you know, incident. Because we talked about that early on, removing things that were no longer, you know, relevant.
I'm gonna put it back to Mr. Terrapini. Does the purchase of the spoil site by referendum change your opinion on this at all?
well, remember, I wasn't for the city being able to do spoil purchases by eminent domain at the time.
You were
because
not, I'm sorry.
Because it seemed to me that we were setting ourselves up to having the Board of Commissioners circumvent the will of the people. So if the referendum had failed and then the Board of Commissioners circled back and said, well, we're gonna buy it anyway, then I thought that was not appropriate. But then, so it did pass, right? So we're at a position where it passed. The question was, it authorized the city to make the purchase, okay? Then it didn't demand that they make the purchase, it authorized them to make the purchase. In the past, I will tell you that there's precedent that the referendums have passed and the Board of Commissioners did not purchase the property that was approved in referendum. I'm not saying that's happening now. So what I'm saying is, in deals, it's not a deal until the deal is done.
Right.
But now we're back to square one. In a mental exercise, we're at square one. So do you want to leave it in there in case something foobarbs with this and that they still could go somewhere along the river or somewhere and find an alternative site, you know, for,
I mean, if we're talking, the only thing, if we're talking about expectation,